Alrighty, so vocabulary for 1-8, we're going to take a look at equations. An equation is a mathematical statement that uses an equal sign. Notice the word equation has a root that sounds a lot like equal, so that's actually where that comes from. An example is something like x plus 3 equals 10. Notice it has an equal sign. That's an equation. I did say 10, didn't I? An open sentence is an equation that contains one or more variables and may be true depending on the value of the variable. Again, notice here that it has to have a variable in order to be open. So first off, also it's an equation. So a couple different words going on there. So kind of like the last one I wrote. So you'd go 3x plus 4 equals 27x minus 3. That is an open sentence. It has variables in it. And it could be true depending on the value of the variable. You'll be solving those soon enough. The solution of an equation is the value of a variable that makes an equation true. So if I have a nice simple one like x plus 3 equals 10, and I say to you that x equals 7, well, you can plug that in and find out 7 plus 3 does indeed equal 10. So the solution right here for this equation is 7. Equivalent equations are equations that have the same solution. So if I said to you x plus 3 equals 10, and I also gave you 2x minus 2 equals 12, I would argue with you that the equations have the exact same solution. I believe that x equals 7 in both cases. And you can plug it in to prove that that's true or not true. So let's see here, 7 plus 3 is 10. 2 times 7 is 14, minus 2 is 12. So these are equivalent equations because the solution to both is 7. More properties. You know I love them. The addition property of equality says adding the same number to each side of an equation produces an equivalent equation. Technically, the addition property of equality also encompasses the subtraction property of equality because subtracting a number from both sides is the same as adding its opposite, adding a negative. So again, adding the same number to each side of an equation produces an equivalent equation. So if I had x plus 3 equals 10, and I would, let's say in this case, subtract 3 from both sides, we know that x is 7. This is also an equation. And so the addition property lets me produce an equivalent equation. So these two are equivalent equations because 7 works in both of them. Oddly enough, when x equals 7, you plug in a 7, right? So again, there's an example of the addition property of equality. And as I did state, you are welcome to use subtraction as well, as long as you subtract the exact same thing from both sides of the equal sign. Now, some teachers like to draw this like line down the middle, right, to keep everything equal on both sides. And I'm good with that or not good with that, depending on how it looks to you. Inverse operations are operations that undo one another. In other words, subtraction, right, undoes addition, or addition undoes subtraction. Multiplication undoes division. Oops, not exactly what I meant to write. Undoes division, and vice versa. That they undo each other, so they are inverse operations. As you saw in the last example, I had x plus 3 equals 10, and I subtracted 3 to undo the addition of 3. So you see here it was adding 3, I subtracted, I did the exact opposite. So inverse operation. Multiplication property of equality technically also encompasses division, so we could also call it the multiplication and division property of equality, but technically it is just called the multiplication property of equality. And the reason that is that if I multiply by the reciprocal, that's the same as dividing. In other words, if I multiply something by 1/3, that's the same thing as dividing it by 3, the exact same thing. So that's why we just call it the multiplication property of equality. I'll put a multiplication sign in front of that. There we go. So again, multiplying each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, notice non-zero number, produces an equivalent equation. Nice example of that might be something like this. If I had 1/3 x equals 6, and I could multiply both sides of that equation by 3, right, the reciprocal there, by 3. These cancel out, so I get x equals 18. And you can always check those, remember, and that's something I do require from you. You can say 1/3 of 18 equals 6. 1/3 of 18 is 6, so 6 does equal 6. So there was my correct answer. Again, we're using multiplication property of equality, which encompasses division.